What is up, everybody? This is Devin Denofa, and for those that have been following me, you know I'm starting a series of spiritual fitness series. And in the Harvest, we focus on helping myself and everybody else being a part of this to achieve high performance living, holistic success. And that's not just in your financials. Hey, it's not just in your fitness or whatever it is, holistic. And one of the most important things for me that I've uncovered under my personal development is my spiritual fitness. And I knew that if I just get better at this, it helps everything else I'm trying to work on, and it rises all ships. And within that journey, I was brought to a community by my friend Brad, Warriors for Christ. This is where God is taking me and continuing to take me on this journey. And in that community, I've met one of the most incredible people that I believe God, just another testament to what he's doing in my life, Pastor Anthony Hart. And, as we talk, Pastor Anthony he listens in there, but he is the voice in that community. And I've just been kind of like pulled to him, and he is our next interview for our spiritual fitness interview. We got Pastor Anthony Hart, who is the lead pastor of Greenbriar Community Church. And, guys, as for those that watch this, I just want you to see, hey, if you're even thinking about taking that first step into maybe showing up to that church, right? But you're like, guys like me don't go there, right? You got to be in the collared shirt and the suit to go in there, and you got to be perfect. Like, this is why I'm bringing these individuals here to show you to maybe take that first step. So Pastor Anthony, again, like I told you before we even started recording, and I wish I did because you already said so many great things. I am honored, man, honored to have you do this interview with me. And hopefully, whether it's now, whether it's the recording or somebody listens to it 10 years from now, impact people's lives and make them take that first step to following their journey with the Lord. So Pastor Anthony, thank you so much for hopping on here, my friend.
Bro, I'm honored as a brother just to be here. We've been able to spend very small amount of time together, but in those moments, it's been so fruitful. And when you get with just the right people in life, there's a connection that occurs. And every moment that we've got to share, whether it be through texting or across the screen and the Zoom calls, power of pandemic, right? It's been so impactful. So when you invited me on for this, it was an easy yes for me, bro.
Excuse me. You guys bear with me. I have this little cough that I'm battling, but for the most part. So
I'll drink water for you then.
So the one thing that when I shared there's a reason why I shared these photos, man. It's like, all right, so there's a pastor, man. He's got a cool beard. He's in a black t-shirt. And I shared another photo of you at a CrossFit gym. For me growing up, that was the furthest visual of a pastor that I could have ever thought of, right? And I listen, whatever helps people take their first steps towards God. I grew up Catholic, hey, I was in religion, but like that was something that I've never related to being a pastor. So when did you become a pastor? Like, was this something that you thought like, hey, you know what, like this is a thing, like you can actually preach like this? Like, tell me about that journey of like becoming a pastor first.
Bro, it's been my whole life. So what you're talking about, seeing what a pastor looks like in a lot of our minds, that's my dad. I was born and raised in a pastor's home. Since I was little, I was, after church, the kids would play in the church and we would go in, and in the Catholic, you don't go play in the church, right? But in the Christian faith, especially a small backwood country church in Arkansas, we would do potluck dinners and stuff like that. So the kids would all go in and we'd have church. And because I was the pastor's kid, I was always the one preaching. So it was kind of ingrained in me early. But that mindset of church was the same way. I wore suits. I got a new suit for Easter every year and all the things. It was dress up. And my dad, if you go to his church today, he's going to be in a suit. He comes to our church now and he'll dress down, which means he removes his tie, but he's still in a collared shirt and a sport coat. So that's my pops. But realistically, I didn't see this until later in life. I knew there was a calling on my life to do it. But as I witnessed church, man, I saw the hurt that church brought with it. I saw the way church hurt people, and it was just this machine that if you don't do these things, then you just get left behind. Like, you should have got it together. It's over for you, bro. Or until you fix yourself, there's no place for you here. I saw how pastors were treated because they're supposed to have it all together. And the moment they make a mistake or something, man, it's just everybody turns and on you. Or if you, God forbid, you challenge somebody, a step on somebody's toes, they'll leave in a heartbeat. And I saw that hurt. And at 18, right out of high school, out of full paid scholarship to Arkansas State, and my buddy talked me into joining the Navy. And I said, okay, so let's do it. And I began to run away from the calling on my life. And I didn't realize it at the time because it was that hurt. But later on in life, I looked back and there was just, I didn't want to be a part of that. I was still a Christian. I still go to church when I was at home and say all the right things where nobody realized what was going on in my life, but I'd come back and sow my wild oats. It actually took until about, I was 24 at the time. I got married to my wife, and our first year of marriage was hell. She wasn't raised in church, but she'd been saved at the age of 16 and had gotten out. We met in a dance club, doing our thing and just hanging out with the wrong people. And our first year of marriage was headed down a one-way road to disaster. And we said, we got to get back into church. So we got back into church, found an amazing church family. And about 2 years into that, my pastor calls me in his office one day and said, hey, have you ever felt the call to preach? And I said, yes, sir. I've ran from it for a long time. And he said, I know. God told me to tell you to stop running. It's time to go. And that really was the launching moment for me to, I'm going to say this as nice as possible, get up off my ass. You'll find I'm pretty real. What? A pastor said that? Don't tell my mom and dad I said it. I'm just kidding. I had to start fighting and pushing it and get back to this calling. And I look back at my life at that point, and what I found was, man, I tried every way to screw this up, but God never gave up on me. And to put somebody like that in my life to say, it's time to go. Like, I think so many of us think that we've messed up in life so much that we can't get back, or we fail to realize that we've been created with a God-given purpose. And we feel like we've just not done enough to sustain it. And God's like, nope, it's still there. You just got to fix some things in your life and turn your direction, but it's there. So we did ministry there, ended up becoming the campus pastor. My wife was the children's pastor, and I was about to retire from the Navy. So I was doing these in tandem. And the year I was getting out of the Navy, they had offered me at that church a full-time position for that campus pastor with the exact dollar amount I needed to fill in the blank of what I'd been making in the Navy to retirement. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is what God wants me to do. Then we ended up going to a conference down in South Carolina. And it was in there on the first day, bro. You talk about those God moments. And anybody that's on here watching this, it's a little hesitant about this God thing. All I can do is share you my testimony and show you the way that God showed up in my life. And hopefully it opens the door to you to say, you know what, maybe I'll check this God guy out. Was in a conference on the first day. And I said, and we weren't supposed to be there. Like, everything happened on the last day. We didn't have a babysitter. I couldn't get off work, all the things. A day out, all the blocks fell into place. There was a space for us to go. We had babysitters show up. Work gave me off. So we were able to go. So I get in this conference on the first day, and I'm sitting there. They're kind of playing music before the first preacher comes up. And I said, okay, God, you got me here. Now, what are you trying to tell me? And I just opened my Bible. So, the Bible is a very daunting thing with all these words and all these lessons. And people's like, I don't even know where to begin. Time and time again, there's been moments where I just opened up the thing and I just started reading. Well, I opened up and there's a story about a man named Saul, who was the one persecuting the Christians in the New Testament. He was the Jew of all Jews. He was taking it to all these these Jesus lovers. And in a road, he was walking down the road, going to persecute more Christians. And he was struck down by this light and was blinded. And it says scales come upon his eyes. And I just felt, this voice inside me say there were spiritual scales before there were ever physical scales. And I began to think about that. And I just wrote that down in my note. Well, the first speaker gets up and he's at the end of his sermon. He says, I really feel this in my spirit right now. He said, I want everybody to put your hands on your eyes and I want to pray something. He said, God, I pray that you would remove the scales from our eyes. Like there's no interaction between he and I. There's been nothing said about scales other than me and God having this one-on-one. And I knew then that I was in the right place at the right time. And over those next 3 days, Devin, he just began to unravel some things in me, so much that when I walked out of there, I knew it was time to go. We've been in a great church with a great church family, but it was time to do something different. And I didn't know how I was going to tell my wife that, because I don't know where the money was coming from, any of that. But I get in the car and I said, babe, I think it's time for us to go. I think it's time for us to go do something different. And she goes, I know, I've been waiting on you. And I looked back over the last 3 years, and there have been arguments and things between us, but she had truly just been, God had told her to shut up and wait on him. 5 minutes later, our friend Tamara calls us. She was at the conference with us. We hadn't talked about any of this. She's in her own car. She says, so when are we starting our new church? I guess just God, 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 all these moments. I said, okay, I hear you. I got back to doing my own thing. I told our pastor, we got about a year before we leave, but it was easy to fall right back into the rut of doing the same old, being in that position, all that. And finally, it took my pastor coming in one Tuesday and say, bro, you got to go. There's something struggling inside you, and you're not going to grow anymore in that seat. You've got to go do your own thing. So we started a house church. And that was the beginning of this, like really unraveling what I thought being a pastor should be, because I had what my dad was, I had what my pastor was. And there was moments in ministry I've struggled where I said, I can't be a pastor. I'm not those guys. And that was another moment I flipped open the Bible, and it was a story of David where he was going to fight Goliath, and Saul tried to put his armor on it, and it didn't fit. It was too heavy. And he said, no, I don't want it. And I just felt God say, you can't wear your dad's calling. So it was this season just of years of really getting me to a place of listening. And that home church moment was that I got to listen some more. I need to listen to people. I need fresh perspective in my life. But who's God calling me to? Because I think that's the biggest part of ministry. When you find that space, is when you know who you're called to, then you can speak their language. You can meet them where they're at. And it was really that unraveling. And then fast forward a year, 2 years later, we end up through a series of events back into a church, helping them. They'd come through a broken season, and God said, it's time to be here. And I argued. I said, God, I don't want to be in a church. I want to be in the home. That was the easy. That's the conversations, the dinner tables. That was amazing. I said, why are you bringing me back into a brick and mortar building that you took me out of? And he said, because I had to undo you before I could put you back into that place. So I call that whole season of my life my undoing. So how do I get to this space with the beard, with my wife's tatted up, like we've got a story? It's because God had to let us walk that journey out. And for people, like you said earlier, people to see that there's a different side of church. My heart is for Jesus, but there's so many things that we've put on this, some constraints and requirements that are not in this book, or if they were, they aren't in there for the right reasons. They were addressing certain situations, not required to tell you to do what, so I think that's the long answer for how did I get to this place. I just had to stop doing and listen.
Now, for those that watch me do interviews, I don't shut up, and that's my problem. And if you notice, man, I can listen to you talk all day and not say a word, because it's just, I'm on this journey with the Bible, and you said it's intimidating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to understand it all.
Especially because we tell you to only read the King James Version. If you're really spiritual, you only read the King James Version. Ugh. There's some old English language in there that is like bogging you down. And start from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So where all the questions are like, what? I'm going back and I just have this imaginary God that's like making everything. And I don't believe in that just this guy would come talk to me. So now you're telling me to believe in all of this? Like, I'm done with this Bible. So,
and sorry, man, I don't know why. I just get emotional sometimes. But for the most part, you said, somebody's, all right, listen, I'm thinking about it now. And then you pick up this Bible and you start in the beginning, and it's intimidating. Like, as I'm strengthening my, my journey with God, it is incredible. I had a few mentors a long time ago told me, that the Bible is the best business book in the world. I never understood it. And I hear you talk, and you literally relate so much of your life to scripture. And, I aligned recently that speaks to me a lot when we talk about God is the Prince of Peace, right? And I see a lot, when I hear you and, people who are filling their cup with the spiritual word and going on that journey, that's not saying everything is perfect, right? But I feel like there's a lot more peace. I don't know. And when I hear you talk, and man, it's just, there is, again, like, that doesn't mean that you don't have you're only human. We're all human. But I feel kind of when they talk about the Prince of Peace, man, I just feel people that are getting their spiritual strength, like they're doing those reps and they're getting better at it. It just brings a lot more peace in their life when they're making decisions, when they're in certain situations.
Yeah.
That's just one thing I see a lot when I hear you talk. It's so peaceful. Like, you're just, man, you deliver so well, you speak so well, you relate to scripture and all these different things, man. It's just, so when somebody sees them and they're like, man, this Bible is intimidating, like, what would you suggest for somebody watching and be like, man, I really vibe with this guy. Man, I wish there was a pastor around here that was like this guy. All right. So then they go and then they take their first step and order the Bible. What would you say to that?
Well, the first step, I think, before you ever get into this, the thing for you and me to understand, and people like me and you, Christians, is to realize that our lives are the first Bible that most people will ever read. And I think this is a huge challenge, bro, because it really questions what we're doing with not our Sunday, because most people aren't going to come read our Bible on Sunday. We're locked in a box with people just like us, and we tend to just wear our Sunday best in there anyway, so we got it all together. So the one place we could be broken, we're not. The one place we should be leaning on people, we're not. So then when we walk out Sunday, because we had to have it together for an hour and a half, Monday through Saturday, we're jacked up, and people see that. Like, you come into work and you should have shared yesterday what you had going on in your life, but you couldn't. Your marriage is a mess. Your kids hate you, all the stuff. You walk into work on Monday morning and somebody does something wrong and you just let off a string of F-bombs. And before you know it, like, they're like, that dude's a Christian. Like, he's no different than me. Why would I start talking about quitting this, not doing that, don't go there anymore? Like, he's no different than me, so I'm done. Like, I don't need your Christianity. I can keep doing me and look just like you. But I think when church becomes the place where we can really come in and leave our mess there and lean on brothers and sisters, say, it's okay, because tomorrow I got to go get it. I got to go spread this love, this grace, this mercy to somebody who needs it. So if our Monday through Saturday is living out what we're learning, and it's not having it all together, I think that's the problem too, is we think we have to have it all together if people watch. Sometimes it's the moment you don't have it together that they find the biggest amount of truth, because they realize, okay, that person's not perfect, so this is attainable. But I think it's in that place where we realize our lives are a Bible. It is, as we digest this, which is what we're doing, there has to be response. Jesus said, they'll know you by your fruits, not by your words, but by your fruits, what you produce. So I think it's in that space that we set the table for a conversation to occur. And the biggest thing I always say is God wants to speak your language. I think this is the thing the church has to learn so much if we're ever going to connect with people outside of here. We've always expected them to come speak our language. How conceited would it be, Devin, if you went to Spain? And I think there's people like this. You go to Spain, you never learn Spanish, you have zero care for it, and you walk over there and you expect everybody in their home country to speak your language. Like, no, I'm not speaking Spanish, I'm not learning it, I don't care. You have to speak my language if you want to talk to me. It sounds a lot like the church, doesn't it? Like, we walk into their place, walking outside of the church into their place, and we say churchy things, and the these and the thous, if you're a King James Christian, God bless you, the begats and all this stuff, and we expect them to just, and come follow us. That's not how Jesus did it at all. So if anybody's looking to start in the word, start with Jesus, because the rest of it, I always call that like the bomb, and everything comes out from that moment. Jesus really was the place where everything in the Old Testament was validated. And he also, the way he did it, he pretty much re-preached the Old Testament. Because when Jesus talks about, when he's preaching and speaking to people, when he talks about the scriptures, anytime the scriptures are referenced in the New Testament, they're talking about the Old Testament. Because this New Testament wasn't written until after these things occurred. This is a written testimony of what occurred. So they always reference the Old Testament. But I think when we see Jesus and how he did it, then when you go back to that, there's merit and value to how he did it. So I think the two things you have to understand if you're going to dive into this thing is get around some good Christians who are learning as well, not some holier than thou, but some real dudes. Like, this is what I love about our Warriors for Christ. It's a room full of real dudes that are trying to get better, but we can lean on each other. As a pastor, I can come in that room and say, man, I am struggling this. Devin, I need some help, bro. I need some prayer.
That's so important you say that, because I feel like from the outside in, for somebody that, sees somebody go in the church and they didn't decide to do that yet or whatever, a lot, and I've heard this, oh, you think you go to church, you're so perfect.
Yeah.
And what you just said is the exact answer. It's like, no, man, we go because we know we want to do better. We know we need healing. We know we need help. We know we're trying to get better. We're going there. It's like the hospital for the broken. It's not the showroom for the perfect.
Yeah.
And that is from the outside in. A lot of people maybe get the, oh, you go to church, so you're all perfect. It's like, no, man, like that's, I think, the message that I was like, some days, man, and believe me, I digest all the personal, and it's so funny, guys. We had a small group call, and Ed Milet was on it with Pastor Anthony. Pastor Anthony didn't know who the dude was. He was just like, listen, bro, all I know is you're a great dude. You got me fired up, but I didn't even know who he was. My whole point is I digest so much personal development content, YouTube this, read all these books. And I always tell people, you know what the best time for me as far as personal development is? That's Sunday when I'm showing up at the church and I hear my pastor deliver these messages, man. And I'll tell you, if you just removed pastor from your name, from my pastor's name, from some of these pastors, they'd be right next to Tony Robbins with the way that they deliver and with the way that they change lives. That's not their goal. They want to be, compare me to Jesus. I know I'm never going to be him, but compare me to that. That's their, but my point is it's like personal development. We ain't perfect. I'm there to get better. I got so much stuff I got wrong with me. I'm in there crying every Sunday, I don't know, man, I'm crying on a call with you. I don't even know why I did it, but you know what I mean?
I'm the same way. I'm big baby.
That is such a powerful thing that you just said there, man. Like, if you're there to get better, we're there to work on us. We're in this Warriors for Christ. Not to show off our muscles, to show off our whatever that stuff is. We're there because we know that we need help to get to that next level, to battle the stuff that life's going to bring, the challenges that God's going to put towards us to make us stronger. So I want to make sure whoever's listening understands that.
Yeah, man, just start, get around, find the right people. And I'll say this, God doesn't make this hard. Jesus said it, knock and it'll be open to you. Ask and you shall receive. Search and you'll find it. So I'm a firm believer. If you want to give God a chance, if you're like, you know what, I've tried everything else and I keep hearing some good things about this, and believe you and me, you can hear bad things about God if you're listening to the wrong people. But if you get around the right people, like somebody like Devin, and you begin to listen, there's hope. And that's what Peter says in his letter. He said, be ready to give a defense of the hope that's in you. It's not an argument. I'm not going to debate with you. I have something inside me that has changed my life. It's changed my perspective. And I want to do everything I can to help you, not try to shove it down your throat, but I want you to be open to listening, open to receiving. So when you get around somebody like that, it's contagious and it's going to challenge you to get in. And if you've never read the word and you're like, where do I start? Start in the first 4 books of the New Testament. This is 4 dudes telling the story of Jesus. This is where a lot of people try to wreck the Bible right off the bat. There's 4 different books and they're not completely aligned. They tell different stories. Well, imagine this. What if it's 4 dudes and we all walk behind Jesus for his whole life, and then we go to write and tell our story? Guess what? Our stories are going to be different. Why? Because we're seeing it through our lens. If you're a very technical person, go read Luke. Luke was a doctor. So he is very in-depth on a lot of things. He went and got a lot of references when he put his story together and made sure it was all told. John, if you want to know love, go read John and go read his letter, 1 John, because John was the one that he calls him the disciple who Jesus loved. So John was very connected to Jesus, close to Jesus. He was in his inner 3. He was always there in all those places. So when he speaks about love, John was so powerful in sharing the love of Christ that in his last days, he was the last disciple to die. They even tried to kill him. They boiled him alive in oil and he didn't die. But people would carry him to churches to speak about Jesus. Why? Because he knew him in such an intimate way. When you read his book, 1 John, it's a letter, I believe, to the church, and I call it the love letter to the church, because it is outlining who Jesus was, his very nature, the love of God that Jesus exhibited. So when you look at Jesus and you read those stories, Jesus did it different than a lot of people do it. He's not standing on a stage all the time preaching. He's going and having dinner with folks that nobody would have dinner with. The Pharisees and the religious elite, they find him in a bar having dinner, and he's like, why are you here? Why aren't you here with us in the temple? He said, I didn't come for you. I came for the sick, just like you said earlier. I came for those who are hurt and can't get right and need help. And I'm not going to just stand in the temple and wait for them to come to me. I'm not going to stand in there and let them think that we all got it figured out. I'm here to come to them because I have hope in me, and I want to give it to everybody who's available. Zacchaeus is a great story. He was up in the tree. He was a tax collector. And if you don't know about tax collectors in that day, they were Jewish people, but they were hired by the Roman people to effectively steal money from the Jews. They would take crazy taxes, and then they were allowed to have a bigger portion of that money. So they were padding their pockets on their own people's dime. This guy, who everybody hated, short, Jesus was coming, and he had heard about him, said, man, I want to go check it out. Like, doesn't it sound like today? Like, what if people had to climb up in trees just to see what's going on in our churches today because they didn't wear the right suit or have it all figured out? But we've closed our boxes now, so you can't do that. But I wish we did, had glasses and see people looking in the glass. What's going on? And in the midst of all that, he climbed in this tree so he could see. Jesus stops, doesn't address any of the crowd who's spiritually elite, who's got it all figured out. And he looks at Zacchaeus and says, bro, calls him by name, Zacchaeus, come down. You don't know that man, but he knew his name. Called him down. Everybody else was calling him sinner. Everybody else was calling him cheat, whatever you want to call him. He said, Zacchaeus, come down. I'm going to your house tonight. Let's go get some grub. And because that, he goes home with him, has conversation, shares bread with him, breaks bread in that moment. Not only does Zacchaeus get saved, his whole family gets saved. And then Zacchaeus returns double the portion of money he's taken from people back to the people he took it from. Like, completely heart change. Not because somebody pointed their finger at him and said, you're wrong and you're a horrible person and you're a sinner and you need to change yourself. Instead, it was like, bro, I want to go to your house. I want to share space with you. I want to share conversation with you. I want to share the hope that I am to you at no cost. Let's just go. So I think that's what we got to get better at as a church. I think that's what's amazing about these calls like this, with just, we're all trying to figure it out. But at some point I said, I refuse to let a red rope, to let a stage, to let a group of people who are supposed to have it all figured out separate me from those I've been called to.
I told you guys, man, and the one common thing that you're hearing is Jesus goes after the people who don't think they have it all figured out, the hurt, right? And the people who need it, right? That's he Pastor Anthony even said, he was like, he wasn't in the temple, he was in the bars trying to find the people, trying to help the people. He was out searching for them, man. And as I hear you, I'm just getting my education. I'm always trying to make sure I'm consuming a lot of this stuff too. So just, I always love, on some of our calls, man, I've seen you literally help some powerful men like change their mindset on so many things. And I've seen you like literally changed the paradigm for them to where they went from so upset to like a completely different attitude, literally revitalized by you talking to them. Your word on forgiveness, your word on, if somebody's listening, there's so much uncertainty in the world right now, right? Let's just say that, hey, you know what, man, I believe that there is a God, but look at all this stuff that's happening. You got, whether it's inflation, oh, I want this guy voted in, or I want that guy voted in, or this is the problem, or that's the problem. All this chaos around. People need something, right? Something right now that they can believe that can help them. And that, listen, this is the deal. I know a lot of people want instant gratification. That's just the way humans are, right? And what I do believe is, for me, he can give me instant gratification, meaning that he can change and make me feel better in uncertain times to keep me going. What would you say to that person? Like, maybe like what, I don't even know how to ask this. What do you think Jesus would tell us, like with all the world, like with what's going on now? I don't know how to word the question, but with all this stuff that's going on now, how would somebody, like, what do you think Jesus would tell somebody how to act with all this stuff happening?
I don't think his method would change any from what he did to those disciples. So if you think about it, we love to make today worse than any other time in history. I hear a lot of Christians say, oh, we're in the end times because Jesus said it's going to get this, this, and this. I think when he spoke that, what he said is the moment I step off this earth, you're in the end times. The moment I'm out of here, it's bad until I come back officially. You can go talk to the Jews in World War II. I guarantee they thought Jesus was coming back. Like, tell me that doesn't feel like the end times of going through that. When Jesus was there, they used to hang Christians, like Jewish people, they would string them up right outside of town. After Jesus passed and as he left earth and he came back and then leaves, Nero used to use Christians as torches for his parties. He would dip them in oil and burn them alive to provide light for his parties. So it's never gotten any better. It's worse because the absence of him. So I think his method would still be the same. Come follow me. He goes to those 12 disciples. And if you don't know about Jewish culture, every one of those young men had aspired to be a rabbi. Every Jewish boy goes to school to be a rabbi. They know by the age of 6, 7, they know the first 5 books of the Bible by heart. They didn't have, in those days, they didn't have access to the Bible like we do, where they just pull it out. They went to the temple. That's where the manuscript was, and they learned it. And the men in the home were the Bible, the father or the sons. But at around 1st or 2nd grade, to determine if they were going to rabbinical school, it was based off the question they asked, not what they knew, because they all knew the same thing. It was what question did they ponder out of what they've read and what they knew. And if they didn't ask the right question, if there wasn't a depth in that question, they were sent back to their father's home to work in their father's business. So think about these 12 young men. They were working their father's business. Why? Because they weren't good enough to be a rabbi. And that's the one thing, that's the people Jesus went to. Most rabbis would go to the temple, take these students from the temple, and they would be their disciples. Jesus went to everyday jobs and said, I know that society has said you're not good enough. I'm going to change the world with you. And it's the same way that you and I, wherever you're at today, wherever you're at watching this, you're like, I'm not good enough. I've been there. I did 21 years in the Navy, and I thought I ran away from this calling in my life. And then I said, man, I've thrown away all of my life now. I've done 21 years and I've not been a pastor, all these things. I know you wanted me to, but now it's too late. And he said, nope, come follow me. And I think that's the invitation along the way. It's just to start following, because when you get around him, regardless of what's going on around you, there is a hope. And I think that's what we have to realize. The world around us is not going to get any better. So Jesus constantly said, bring heaven to earth. How do we do that? By getting that heaven in us to change the atmospheres of the place we're in. I don't have the ability to change what's happening in Russia and Ukraine right now, but I have the ability to change what's happening in this office in Chesapeake right now. I have the ability to change who's watching these airwaves as we share this video out. I have the hope that's in me. It's not me. It's not who I am, but it's sharing what's occurred in me and the change and the shift in my mindset to help somebody realize that you can be the hope in the atmospheres that you occupy. Like, that's what he wants us to do. That's why he picked 12 individual dudes. Those dudes in the temple had a limited reach, but he picked 12 guys to advance the sphere of influence of the kingdom. And it's just what we've talked about in our Warriors for Christ meeting. That's a room filled with successful businessmen. We know how to do business, but are we changing the environments we walk in because of the hope we have or because of the money we have? This is just a provision to carry this to those in need. And when we allow this to invade our workspace, not preach at people, but just being the word, it's going to change the atmospheres. It's going to change the mindsets. It's going to be invitational to somebody who wants to know what's the hope that's in you. And that's when you say, man, let me share about this guy.
Oh man. We can go on for hours. Every time I speak to you, Pastor Anthony, I continue to learn, and I feel like my spiritual strength continues to get better every time I hear you. Again, guys, it's at a bare minimum, and this is the way I think of it too. At a bare minimum, based off of what we're told about Jesus, it doesn't seem like if you lived your life that way, it'd be a pretty bad life. It seemed like you'd be a pretty good person that people would want to be around, right? So unless you didn't want to go down that, didn't have that vision of, hey, I want to be, somebody that people enjoy being around. Like if I have some type of compass on how I want to be, how do I want to live, at a bare minimum, would probably be modeled like this person, right? So when you talk about just start, well, why? Well, yeah, would you want to be remembered as that person who helps people, who continues to change people's lives? Yes, that's a good compass. And I think, hey, if we continue to have everybody just have that mindset, how could the world change? Like, how could the world change if people just had a little bit of that mindset of how Jesus would, what he would do, how he would communicate with people, how he would help people? At a bare minimum, if that's what we say, how do I want to start to follow Jesus? We'll start acting like that. Start caring about people. Like when you think about business, that's the one thing, especially when I go to my church, I always tell people, I'm like, man, if you just treat people the way, Jesus, God wants you to treat people, your business would explode.
Yeah.
Talk about customer service. Talk about leadership. Talk about care. It's all in the heart. You change hearts, you change lives, and that changes any business.
It comes back to one word, and I think it's the word that we have to begin to share with people, because it's one that's not occurring in the society around us, and it's value. We look at the 10 Commandments, and then even when Jesus talked about the 10 Commandments, he brought it down to 2, and he really wasn't saying don't listen to the 10. He was breaking the group of 10 down into a group of 2. So the 10 Commandments were passed down from God to the children of Israel to help us be effective in what the initial conversation with Abraham was. I will bless you, and out of you make a blessed nation, so that you will be a blessing to all nations. And then they got greedy and messed it all up and got trapped in their own thinkings. Then they went and got trapped in Egypt and all the things. So when they get out of Egypt, he's trying to restore them in the wilderness. He gives them these 10 Commandments. And then we fast forward to Jesus, and they asked him, what's the greatest commandment, trying to get him to pick one out of the 10 over the other. And he says, the first commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your mind, your heart, and your soul. And really what he's taking, if you go look at the 10 Commandments, the first 4 commandments are exactly that. Thou shalt have no God before me, no idols, do not use the Lord's name in vain, and take the Sabbath off, that moment of rest to share in that space with him. All 4 of those are a demonstration of loving God with all that you are. The second commandment, he said, is just as important as the first, and that is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So if you devote those first 4, if you devote your heart, soul, and your mind to loving God and getting in moments of connection with him, what happened is you are spending time in the image that you were created. Because it said we are made in the image of God. So once I experience the whole image, then I realize I'm a piece of the image. Right now, you and I, Devin, we represent a piece of the image. So then if I want to know how to be a better me or what my identity is, I don't look at people around me and ask them. I'm going to the one who created me. I'm going back to the image that I was created in to get strength. So then I begin to love myself in a different way because I value me as he values me. And then when I understand that I'm looking at other image bearers around me, even though they're jacked up and messed up just like I was, then I realize I have to love them the way he loves me because I'm loving the image. And as I love them the way God loves me, and I'm reconnecting them to who God is, I am restoring the image of God in the earth and restoring the initial covenant that we will be a blessing to those who don't know him so that they would meet him, so they would connect with him. This is where I think businessmen have missed it. We've shy away from the word prosperity or abundance because we think we're supposed to be broke because he told one guy one time, a rich young ruler, that you need to leave all that behind. He didn't care about his money or he was a ruler. What he cared about was that his identity was tied up in those things. Mm. He was coming to Jesus, and Jesus, he said, I did all the 10 commandments. I do all I'm supposed to. And he said, I know, but that's not your identity. Your identity is hung in what you've achieved. And you'll never be able to follow me because you feel like you got everything that you need. Lay down your titles, lay down what you've achieved, and come follow me because you still got some things to pick up. I don't even think he would have said, he could have used that money for the kingdom, but he couldn't in that moment because that was that guy's money. And I think that's where business, we got to get away from that mindset. He wants to bless us, but he's not going to bless us if we're greedy, if our ego's all out there and it's all about me, because that's never the purpose. Jesus didn't come and say me, me, me. He kept saying my Father. I do what I see my Father do. I'm here because my Father sent me. We've got to be the same way in our business, in our homes, in our lives. Man, everything I do carries the impact of the one who sent me. I want to do it so well. And when I mess up, I'm going to go back and talk to him and let somebody else know, man, I messed up today. I'm sorry. I apologize. So we are called to be blessings. And I think when we have that posture of wanting to bless, that's when the provision of blessing comes, because he knows you're not going to pile it all into your pockets, into your homes, into your cars. Meanwhile, the people around you suffer. It's truly going to be able to take care and share the gospel of grace and mercy to those who are in need.
I'll tell you what, and we're coming up to it, so I just want to leave it at this. You are an absolute blessing, my brother, to everybody you speak to, everybody who watches this, everybody you preach to at church, everybody who watches you online. Man, you can rest assured that, well done, good and faithful servant. I mean, you are the example, brother, are the absolute example of, empowering, impacting other people the way Jesus wants us to. So I just want you to know that. And for the little bit of time that I've known you, I'm telling you, you've left an imprint in my soul that I can't wait to see, our relationship continue to grow. I know that we're going to be doing some amazing things in the future. And man, it is just, I am excited for what God has as far as the future, just of the Warriors for Christ, of us, of what we do for other people, what people who watch this maybe take the first step to just show up to a church they vibe with, that speaks the Bible. It's just exciting, but I do want to make sure that man, I don't care if it's like, forget about what's behind you. If there was just like a field of just grass and you were there, man, all I see is like an ivory tower of value, man. You deliver some great stuff, and I am very honored to say that I know you, man, and you're doing amazing things. So, Pastor Anthony, thank you so much. It's always a gift to speak with you, my friend. I appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next Warriors for Christ Bowl, my friend.
Yeah, man. Are you going to be in Nashville next month?
Yes, sir.
Nashville, quick plug for anybody who may listen to this between now and then. Nashville, November 3rd through 5th, the Grow for God Conference. If you've got a business, we're going to shuffle the deck on business and faith, and I get to speak at it again. Our boy Brian Hess gets to speak. Tomorrow, I'm going to be a published author, which is stupid to me. Bro, I got asked to be in this Joyful Entrepreneur book. 19 other people. Ryan Austin's in there, who
Yeah.
Keith Calloway Sr. and Lillian Calloway. So
So what's the book about? What's that book
it's
about? So we
it's
can.
called Joyful Entrepreneur, and it is really blending business. It's 20 people telling their stories through a Q&A format of how important it is to incorporate faith into our business and impact those around us. So it drops tomorrow on Amazon, just in the Kindle version, and then in a month we're doing the book launch party at Grow for God. So it will be available there. I don't know, man. And I share all that to say this: you need people in your life who are going to kick you out of the boat. Even after all the things you said about me, Devin, I still struggled in the next thing. I'm doing enough. I'm doing good enough. But it took people like my friend Tamara, like my wife, like Brian and Brad to say, bro, there's more to you. Let's go. And so I always say that surround yourself with people who will challenge you to be better and love you when you're not, because it is a process. But man, I have some good people in my corner who keep pushing me. And I think that's the beauty of our group. Find a village of people who will walk through this life with you, not finger point name call, but will extend a hand, pick you up, and walk it out with you.
Love it. Pastor Anthony, thank you so much, my friend, and I will see you tomorrow night. Thank you.
Yeah, bro. Love you, man.
Love you too.